Welcome to the February 3rd, 2010 special meeting of the Fayetteville Telecommunications Board. We're here to talk about the CAT board and the operation of CAT, but mostly it's just to answer some complaints. We do not want to broaden our discussion very far from the details that involve the recent extended meetings that the CAT board held, and then subsequent complaints about the operation of that board. This is not a legal type hearing. This is not an attempt to judge. This is simply a chance for people to air those grievances and for others to respond appropriately. Everyone will be allowed to talk, and that includes members of this board. I don't think we're going to talk a whole lot. It would be nice if we could keep each speaker's, well, starting with the complainants, at least one of them I recognize will be long, but we would like to hear that as succinctly as possible. We don't want you to leave out your details or anything, but let's stick strictly to what we're here to do. And I believe that 3 minutes each should be enough for other people to comment in answer or in agreeing or disagreeing with those complaints. And if we don't embellish too much, maybe we can keep this orderly, hopefully relatively calm and productive meeting, because we want to see CAT continue to succeed. We want to see the CAT board, well, we're not taking a vote on this, but I think everyone agrees. I haven't heard anybody say the opposite. We'd like to see the CAT board successfully function and the station continue to do as it has done and to get better. And so anything you complain about, I hope you have a comment, a possible solution in mind.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
I may be able to add some information which might be helpful, and I know I provided this to members. I believe you got it through email, a memo, and I know that members of the public have not had benefit of this, and so I'd like to, if possible, perhaps just provide a little of that information so that everyone can hear it, so that we know what the sorts of things we can do, the sort of things we can't do, and why. And some of this is well known to the board, but for the sake of the public and those who may be watching, this Telecommunications Board has no authority other than that which is provided in the Fayetteville City Code. Our code provides that the Telecommunications Board shall, quote, oversee the administration of any cable television channels or other telecommunications facilities designated for public access, educational, or governmental, meaning PEG, use, unless the City Council enters into a contract with another entity or institution for such administration. If the city enters into a contract with another entity for administration of a PEG channel, this board, the Telecommunications Board, shall ensure contract compliance. Furthermore, this board must perform periodic evaluations of contract compliance, and they have duties to report that to the council on a somewhat routine basis. The board advises the council and makes recommendations on telecommunications infrastructure, but it's important to note that the board itself does not maintain the power to act. I know as members of the board are aware, the City of Fayetteville has entered into a contract with Community Access Television Incorporated, and an independent, private, nonprofit corporation concerning operation of the public access channel. A copy of that contract was provided to members of the board, and actually I do have a few extra copies of this memo as well as the contract, should anybody be interested. Those will be sitting there, and perhaps someone could grab those if they're interested in having one. But since there is a contract in place between the city for operation of the community access channel, this board's manner of review in any situation is limited only to contract compliance. This board has no authority to address internal personnel issues at CAT. The board has no authority to request or demand the hiring, retention, or firing of any CAT employee. The board has no authority to intervene in any internal workings of CAT. The board has no authority over whom CAT may designate as a manager, or for that matter, any other employment position with CAT. What this Telecommunications Board may do is ensure contract compliance by requesting information required to be provided by CAT in the current contract. The board may inquire into relevant information concerning contract performance by CAT. The board may listen and receive relevant material concerning complaints with CAT by anyone to the extent that such complaints concern CAT's performance under the existing agreement. It is relevant for the Telecommunications Board to determine the legal authority of CAT and or its board of directors to enter into an agreement with the city due to the fact that the contract that we've entered into together provides that the city may suspend or terminate that agreement if there is a dispute as to the legal authority of CAT or the person signing the contract on CAT's behalf. The Telecommunications Board in and of itself does not have the authority to suspend or terminate. It can recommend any such action to the council. So if that helps the public in sort of focusing the comments to the board and what this board can do, that's my only intention. Obviously, people will make the comments that they desire to make, and I'm not trying to say you can't, okay? But when you say that, just know what they can do and what they can't do, and hopefully that'll help focus the discussion a little bit.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on the board want to comment before we begin? I believe it would be appropriate then to, or from the public? Okay. I believe the oldest complaint, the first one I heard of, was from Ms. Cherie Burnett. Thank you.
My name is Cherie Burnett. I am a producer and customer of Community Access Television. I originally sent my complaint to Sky Blaylock, who responded to the complaint. I believe you all received a copy of the giant email that was sent out. Did anyone not get a copy of it? Because I have an extra copy if you'd like to look at it. In the bylaws for Community Access Television, it states real specifically that they have to have 7 to 15 board members. Board members are supposed to serve 3 years, and when their term is expired, they are to be replaced within 90 days. It was brought to my attention that a couple of board members had been seated over 3 years, so I looked into this, and in fact, through 2009, as of April of 2009, they did not have enough board members that had not expired their terms to be an actual board anymore. I believe I sent you guys a chart in regards to that, showing the expired membership on the board. I sent this complaint, forwarded it on to the CAT board. The CAT board decided, after much email, to hear this complaint at the January meeting. Their response to this complaint was to re-elect the board members whose terms had expired. This has never been done before. I've been in the basement of Community Access Television all morning. I cannot find any documentation that this has ever been done before, that a board member has ever sat for over 3 years straight. Basically, that's the crux of the complaint. In addition to that, the board has been spending a lot of time in executive session in regards to the manager's evaluation. After being told repeatedly I could not have the manager's evaluation FOI'd to me, I did get part of it given to me by Sky Blaylock herself, as it is part of her personnel file, and she's allowed to release that information. And the piece of information I got was actually something called Job Performance Standards for Community Access Television Manager. This is obviously not specific to Sky, even though there is a place where she had to sign it or risk termination of her job. But it appears that this was a piece of policy that was created in an executive session and never voted on by the full board. And in addition to not being voted on, they refused to give it to me under the Freedom of Information Act. So that I find incredibly disturbing. I mean, that's just not ethical behavior. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I think you guys I have documentation for all of this. I went back, I tried to find the earliest copy of the bylaws today, only to find that evidently any copies of the bylaws created before 2003 have vanished. But I did find the Articles of Incorporation. I do have copies of this for you guys if you'd like it. In that, it specifically states that the term for which a director is elected or appointed shall not be less than 1 year nor more than 3 years. And in addition to that, I found multiple things regarding board members during the 90s and when their terms expire 3 years after the date. I have all this documentation if you would like it. But that's kind of the basis of my complaint, is that the board has not been legal. They were not legal when they signed their contract with the city in November. And they're not legal at the moment. That since they've lost 2 more board members, they're only down to 6, and they don't currently have 7 members. So that's the crux of it. Any questions?
Questions from this board? Questions from the public you may address to me or her, to be addressed to her.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Did I understand right that once you've been the director
Yes.
or something in that capacity, that you cannot ever be director again? That's it. You're finished. You've done your 3 years or so, and that's it. You can't be reelected?
I'm not finding anything that shows that. It is my understanding from what people have told me, which of course is hearsay, I've not been able to find any definitive proof, that Marion Orton did serve more than 1 term, but they were not consecutive terms, that she served 3 years and then she left for a couple of years and then came back. But I think the people who are telling me that are actually a little confused, because from what I can tell, she served on the Open Channel Fayetteville board and then served on the CAT board later, that they were in fact 2 separate entities, is what it appears to me. But like I said, I can't find, there are no board minutes from the 90s, you know, with the sole exception of 1994. Those records, they don't exist. I mean, they have all of what they played on the air in 1992, but they don't have the minutes of those meetings or the agendas or anything like that from the actual board. But the staff documents, as far as financial records and all of that, all appear to be in place. I couldn't find them.
I had been on another board, and you were allowed to serve 2 consecutive terms, and then you had to sit out a term before you could do a third.
And that was in the bylaws.
But that was
of
written out,
board?
and that was in the bylaws.
See,
And
there's
if there isn't
nothing.
any bylaws over at the CAT,
Well, there are bylaws for CAT, but they do not say anything about 2 consecutive terms. They don't say anything about, all they say is when a board member's term expires, they are to be replaced within 90 days, which leads me to think replaced, not re-up, not revoted, replaced with someone else.
I see. Okay.
And obviously, you know, the Articles of Incorporation, the original document that founded this organization, say 3 years, so, and no more.
So basically what you're saying is the people that are in power now they're well beyond their term, and they're actually illegal serving
Yes.
in that capacity.
That is what I'm saying. That-
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If it's helpful to members, I today on the CAT website obtained a copy of the bylaws for the CAT board. And there are no term limits as far as members of the board in the CAT bylaws. And I see nothing that would preclude a reappointment of a director back to that corporation should that be the desire to do so by the other members. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but that was on their webpage and purports to be the most accurate, up-to-date version of the bylaws.
Okay, thank you, Cherie. Those at home can see on their screen an email address, telecomboard@yahoo.com. and you're welcome to email the board. We have a laptop here. Also, there's a telephone number, 575-8301. You may call in.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that phone number is incorrect.
Uh-oh.
The phone number that's on that device is not the phone number for them to call.
Would you
It
tell
would
us?
be,
Well, may I
57.
suggest something first before we give the number out?
Absolutely.
Is that we probably take comments from everyone present, because the phone's gonna immediately start ringing, and you're not gonna be able to really proceed in an orderly fashion at that point. Take the calls, but maybe handle them all at one time after the people who are here have spoken. That's just a suggestion. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but
Well,
Well, that's very good, thank you, sir.
we certainly can attempt to do that.
If you wish to follow Mr. Kelly's suggestion, I would ask that our technical director will put up, when you call for it, he will put a graphic up on the screen with the correct phone number.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, anybody in the audience in this room tonight want to discuss anything about this complaint? No one.
time for.
Okay, thank you.
I wrote a whole big thing up, spent hours on it, and I couldn't print it. So I emailed it, and unfortunately, there's no wireless here, so she doesn't have it. Well, members of the Telecom Board, first let me thank you again for the service that you provide. My name, of course, is Colleen Pancake, and I was until December 2009, the president of Community Access Television Board of Directors. The origin of this complaint is directly related to a personnel issue that should have been resolved in a professional manner between the manager and the board. She has escalated the situation to the point where she had a personnel committee televised live, knowing full well that in this country, issues of personnel matters are to be dealt with in private, not publicly. There are no nonprofits, governmental agencies, or other corporations that do their personnel issues in public. That's intimidation. I know that during my tenure, I tried to follow all procedures. It did slip my notice, the re-up of the 3-year term. However, we did hold elections every year for the officers. And in fact, those are the board members in question. And I was unanimously nominated and voted in for 4 years running as president, as were all the other members that serve as officers of this board. That should not be in question. I would also like to point out that the bylaw concerning board members' minimum requirement, when I joined the board, it had been 5, with a minimum quorum of 1/3. I know that previously it had been as low as a 3-member minimum, again, with the 1/3 required for a quorum. That would mean that 1 person could be a quorum. By the time I got there, it was a 5-member minimum, but the 1/3 quorum was still in effect. We revisited that bylaw and decided to make it a simple majority to make sure that there would be no funny business. At least a simple majority of us would be there to form a quorum. We also, being very optimistic at the time, raised the minimum from 5 to 7. It has been very difficult to achieve that and maintain that. To reduce it seems to make sense, to back to the 5 that it was previously. It's not unethical to do so. In fact, it's necessary. And the board members that serve are the ones that have to deal with the consequences of the bylaws that are enacted. I would ask that you consider the circumstances of these complaints, the timing of them. There is no accident here. There have been a lot of allegations alleged against board members and myself, compromising or slandering my integrity and my character. After donating 6 years of my time, and I might add that I performed the secretarial duties for all but about 6 months of my time served on that board. To have my contribution demeaned so is offensive to me. Now, again, I prepared this speech so as not to speak so inflammatory, but I have tried to serve this community by participating in this organization for this service to it. And I believe that personnel issues have to be dealt with internally and not with the intimidation tactics waged by this current manager. And I believe this exclusionary cabal is attempting a hostile takeover of this organization. I have been a producer since '88, since when I moved here in '87, through 3 separate incarnations of this organization, performing access for this town. I'm a producer too. Do I not count? I feel like every time I walk in there, there's a hostile environment. I feel resentment from these people. And I was asking a reasonable thing, and I got an unreasonable response. And since it was in the paper, I'm going to reiterate. At the same time that I was being told by the manager that they're too busy for an issue I had brought up previously a long time ago, I was also getting Facebook notifications of game levels achieved by an employee during work hours. This had to be addressed, and I did to the best of my satisfaction. Here comes the press. With that said, I was a volunteer. I believe I've given enough of my time. There is one thing I would like to say. I am very saddened and disappointed at the unrealized potential of this organization. I would love to have seen more in-depth workshops, programs offered, a change in the image of CAT. I would love to have seen it progress to what it could be, where we'd have archived videos as well as the streaming that took us a while to achieve. With that said, I wish you all luck in these proceedings. Be fair, be professional, listen to what's actually happening here, and God be with you. Good night.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Pancake? Public or the board?
I just have a comment real quick in regards to something that Colleen stated, if that's all right. Colleen stated that when she was on the board was originally 5 members. That's not actually correct. She joined the board on February 6, 2004, and one of her first actions as chair of the policy committee on May 5th of 2005 was actually to request dropping the board to 5 members from the original 9. There were originally 9 members on the board, 1 to represent each group represented in the contract with the city, the arts, senior citizens, professionals, etc. And it was actually her request to drop this board to 5 originally. It did not come out of committee as 5, it came out of committee as 7, and that is the current bylaw. But I just want to point out that she was in error, and I can get you guys copies of minutes from that meeting where that took place if you'd like.
Thank you. Anyone want to respond or comment further on this portion of the meeting?
You don't have any questions for me? I'm Deidre Leaf. I'm president of the CAT board. And on January 14th, Cherie presented her complaint to the CAT board, and we spent 2 hours talking about it, just a little under 2 hours, and trying to solve the problem ourselves. I sent her a formal response to her complaint regarding the actions of the board. And at this time, I have sent this to you, haven't I, Mr. Shepherd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you all had that. But if at this time, if you have any questions regarding our actions at that time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone?
I guess if there are no other questions, the main one that I have is, do you consider your board to be legally established at the moment?
Yes, actually, we do. We have, at the end of January's meeting, we had 8 board members. The next day, 2 resigned. But we have not acted on those as a board until tomorrow night. And hopefully tomorrow night we'll have those replaced.
You added some on that January meeting, correct?
We added 3 board
I
members.
feel like I know you after watching 6 hours of that DVD.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seemed like several actually were brought on that night or whatever. And then 2 of those, the new ones, resigned?
Yes, sir,
Just curious. Okay.
the next day.
Okay.
But we also had 2 board applicants that we continued into February. We
Right.
have more questions, we need to seat them. And then we have another applicant who will be there also, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I believe there comes a man. Please introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Dylan Farrell. I'm a producer at Cat TV. I've been a producer for a little over 2 years. I was formerly a board member, and due to time constraints, which have nothing to do with any of the complaint structure or anything that's going on, I stepped down from the board. I was working in a TV station. I didn't have time for the meetings. So my former board membership has nothing to do with any internal anything. I just want to address a couple of things. One, as far as the staff, I've never had any kind of problems getting any kind of service from the staff at Community Access. Whenever, even when at times when the staff were working on staff projects, things that, putting short takes together, things that were staff jobs, not anything personal, but things that were actually staff jobs. Whenever I or any producer I've ever seen has gone to a staff member and asked for help, they've dropped what they were doing and went and helped that person. The staff that is currently at Community Access, from everything I can tell, is probably one of the best staffs to ever have worked in Access in Fayetteville, which I would also like to point out that April 1st of this year marks 30 years of Access in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is a milestone to be reckoned with. Not many cities in the United States can say that, certainly not in Arkansas. So I think that is a great achievement, and I think that I don't know, a lot of the things that are going on, I fear threaten the continuation of that, and I would like to see CAT to continue and flourish and thrive. As to a couple of things that I've heard earlier, conducting personnel matters in public and broadcasting parts of a policy meeting. The Arkansas Freedom of Information Act clearly states that most of what most personnel issues are in fact covered by the Freedom of Information Act. There are certain things that are not. They are clearly spelled out. Performance reviews are only reviewable after a suspension or a termination has been completed. Personal information, social security number, address, that kind of thing, is not covered by the Freedom of Information Act. Basically, everything else is. In the idea that requesting that the portion of the personnel meeting that was covered by Freedom of Information, the idea that requesting that to be broadcast is some form of an intimidation tactic, just, to me, doesn't wash. Because having public eyes on something, having having scrutiny by the public, I think is a good thing. Sunshine is a big disinfectant, and I think that if everything that can come out does come out, and everyone just kind of looks at it for what it is, I kind of feel like this whole thing is, in many ways, a tempest in a teapot, and I would like there to be some way that we could just reset everything back to, say, November of last year, when everything was just running along kind of smoothly and everyone was happy with each other. Because we are doing some, we as a group, the producers and the staff, are doing really, really good things down at Community Access. The fundraiser that was held at the town center on Halloween was a phenomenal success. Between the spectacular for the children and the masquerade ball later that evening, the community took a huge part, and it was one of the best organized fundraisers yet. It was my third fundraising year, and it was the biggest turnout. And that also was, in fact, coordinated by staff, not by the board or management. So that I feel that the staff is doing a great job. That's one of the biggest things I wanted to say, and I just want CAT to continue and to get better.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Anybody on the board have a question for Mr. Farrell? Anybody from the public? Yes, sir.
And why was there $5,000 lost in fundraiser?
I'm sorry, sir.
Why was there $5,000 lost at that fundraiser if it was such a great fundraiser?
Which fundraiser? The
one you just
spectacular? Or
Mr.
the-
Chairman,
Please, let's not have this interaction.
may I suggest one thing, if I can? And that would be not to encourage debate among participants.
And that was-
Direct all comments to the board.
Thank you. Please, if you, Mr. Farrell, would allow this man to come to the
Oh,
podium,
certainly.
and you can maybe take a seat right nearby if you want to respond, if you have
All
other
right.
information. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Sergeant George Teagley, retired United States Army. I'm privy to a lot of information that you're not yet privy to. I gained this information when I followed my wife around as a bodyguard after one of Sky Blaylock's associates threatened her life. Now let's get back to the original issue that Sherry Burnett has made, that the board is illegal because there's not enough members. This whole time that she is saying this, Sky Blaylock has been concealing board applications from the board. Rose Sparrow, how many others have they not caught? I'm not sure. That's all I have to say.
You mentioned something about $5,000. That kind of got lost. What?
As I stated, I'm privy to a lot of information because I've been following my wife around. You need to look at the pluses and minuses. She spent $7,000 to get less than $2,000 back. Yet they're trying to make it look
And
as it
again,
was a
we have
great
no dealings
fundraiser.
with the internal workings of CAT, just to
Yes,
remind the board.
yes.
That's right. But as I said, there's a lot of information out there that you need to look for and find out what really is going on.
Thank you, sir.
I have
Farrell,
a-
did you, or, I'm sorry,
I have just one. I'm really embarrassed, and I haven't been very active lately, but you are our new assistant city attorney,
Yes, that's correct.
and I'm afraid I don't know you.
I'm Jason Kelly, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr.
It's
Kelly.
okay.
I really
It's
am.
all right.
But
I understand.
he is the, in my opinion, the final word of what goes on. He's our legal advisor, and we should go by what he says. He knows what's.
Well,
going
and I'm
on,
not,
so.
the comments can be made, but
And-
when I direct a comment, it's to you as your attorney saying, you have no authority, you may or may not have any authority to do anything about what's being told to you. That's all I'm
right,
trying
and
to tell you.
we do not have
Okay.
any authority. We don't have any authority to judge, to make decisions, but we'd like everything to come out, such as the loss of funds, the loss of, I too would like to see it go back to the way it was. We have a great asset in the community access television. I would hate to see that go away. I don't want to lose that. We're one of the few cities that have such a thing, that have such an entity. And I don't want to see anything happen to that. I wish we could turn the clock back, but I think that maybe too much has happened now where maybe we can't do that. We used to have a term when we were playing handball back in, well, I don't know if they had it here, but we had do-overs. I don't know if we can do anything like that. I don't know what brought on the animosity between the people who run the community access television. I wish that all could be amended. I wish that everything could be forgiven and go back to the way it was, because from the reports that I've heard since being on this board, it's been great. I don't have a solution, I'm afraid. I don't know all the facts. I was just hit with another fact, and I just don't know what's all the pieces yet. And when I do get all the pieces, I can only get together with the rest of the board and make a recommendation to our assistant city attorney and have it possibly, if he warrants it, go on to our city council. But we can't make a decision to make everything right. We can only wish and hope. And but we certainly don't want to lose a valuable asset such as community access television. And hopefully there might be a way to resolve all of this and to get everything back to normal. I know that we have a lot of people that have incredible amount of knowledge in how to run it, and they've been doing it for a long time, and perhaps that's why there's been no change. But well, like I said, I just don't know enough about it, and I hope someone else does, that they can help clear it up.
Mr. Farrell, did you want to say another word or respond to something?
I would. I am not privy to the exact accounting of this year's fundraiser, and it's certainly the first I've heard of any physical threats against any board members, which I can't even imagine who would have made such a threat, knowing all the parties. That I'm somewhat stunned by that revelation, or at least partial revelation. All I know is that day-to-day operations at CAT are very smooth. And I welcome any of the Telecom Board to come down and witness this for themselves. I'd welcome anyone from the public even. I've been volunteering, working at the front desk, the desk kind of in the lobby at CAT, and I've also been updating the website. I'm actually the one who added the bylaws to the website so that they could be found. And I would welcome anyone to come down who's curious to come in and see what's going on, because I think that really is going to be the easiest way. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, he said, she said kind of things going on, and I don't see any of it. The day-to-day operation I see is smooth and fluid, and people that need help get help. That's what I see. That's I'm not an expert, but that's my personal experience.
Thank you, Mr.
Like
Farrell.
I said, people should come in and see.
Thank you. Any other question for Mr. Farrell?
I have visited the community access television, and I was treated with respect. Any question I had was answered, but like when anyone comes, especially like someone from a board, you're gonna put on your best behavior. You're gonna put on your best, do your best. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know, all we know that it's apparently had been running smoothly. And this is quite a big surprise to me. We have incredibly knowledgeable people, as I said before, and
Well, I mean, when complaints started formulating in December, it was a shock to me. I didn't know that there was any kind of a problem. And like I said, also, anyone from the public, people who weren't on the board. And in fairness, I didn't know that you were a member of the Telecom Board. If you had come in, I wouldn't have known any different one way or the other.
yeah,
For
that's the
myself.
trouble.
I
Who
can't speak
knows
for
anyway?
staff, but I mean, I was ignorant of that fact. So I don't know.
Sir, what can we do to resolve? We can't do anything.
As was pointed out at the last meeting, and this board has no authority over the internal workings of CAT.
Right, they're a
We
contracted
are in a
entity.
position of, we have a contractual relationship with this nonprofit company, and they are providing services for us, and they are receiving compensation in exchange. If we believe that we are not receiving those services, or they don't have the authority to give the services, then we might be looking at a situation where the contract had been broken or breached, and then have legal remedies. I haven't heard anything yet that makes a flag go up that that's the case. So there have been some accusations, but from what I've read, I wouldn't immediately come running to the board and say, we've got to end this, they're breaching. I've not heard that. There are obviously issues of some sort, of some nature within this organization. There are strong feelings about it, and I would encourage them to sort it out. Because I think it's clear from what I'm hearing that the board wants to continue a relationship with this organization that it has done for several years. And there's limited amount that you can do, as I said before, and so pretty much, yes, there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it.
Thank you, sir. If no one else has something specific to say, yes, sir, please come to this.
The CAT is a great entity. If this board can just allow the CAT board that is now sitting in legal to clean their own house and take care of the problems that FOI prevents most of the board from telling you what's going on, things will be okay.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Let's have a different person. Take turns here a little bit.
You can come back, don't worry.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm glad to see so many participants in the public tonight. Thanks, Skip, for coming out. My name is Bernard Sullivan. I'm the new policy committee chair. I guess I'm the senior member of the full CAT board. And so I jotted down a couple of notes with respect to Ms. Burnett's complaint. I am also a member of the personnel committee that acted upon some of the basis and could speak to some of the rationale behind both the committee's decisions, private and public, and as well as the full board's decisions with respect to the manager's recommendations, as well as what the full board did regarding bylaws, policies, and the contract with the city. So, one-stop shopping, I think, with respect to all the questions in front of the Telecom Board tonight. I'll try and go by to try and to refresh some of the points that Ms. Burnett pointed out in her complaint. As Mr. Kelly already wisely pointed out, in the absence of a stipulation that there is in fact a term limit by default, it was my understanding, and I'm glad to hear that he came to the same understanding, that there is not in fact a term limit with respect to how many terms a board member can or cannot serve. And in point of fact, in my own experience on the board, when I was initially invited and elected to the board, there had already been a board member or two that was on more than 3 years. Granted, I didn't go around and ask everyone how long they've been on the board. It's not what I'm here to do. I was invited to make a contribution, and ironically, this is exactly the contribution that I was thinking I could make, since I'm a process and procedure guy. Getting back to the term limit question, there's also supporting language, which Mr. Kelly might peruse here in just a second here. In Article 5, in the officers section, Section 3, the very last sentence, I'll just read that really briefly for those of you who don't have it out handy. Actually, it's a short section, so if you'll indulge me, Mr. Chair, I'll just read it real quickly. Article 5 is officers section. Section 3 stipulates election and term of office. It stipulates, as Ms. Pancake already said earlier, each April the Board of Directors shall elect officers from among the members of the board. The term of office is 1 year, and each officer shall hold office until a successor has been duly elected or appointed. And the final sentence reads, an officer may serve no more than 4 consecutive terms in one office. Now again, that last sentence out, since it uses the phrase term, or the word term, it's speaking directly to the term of office for an executive office.
That would be like the president of the,
Exactly,
the vice president,
exactly.
the secretary,
Exactly.
not a board, not as a member of the board, not as a director. Right.
So in that context, within that section, it's clearly, well, or maybe not so clearly to the layperson, you could see the rationale behind that particular sentence that allows for their, as Mr. Kelly pointed out earlier, in the absence of a term limit stipulated otherwise, that there's clearly the possibility and apparently the expectation that some board members, certainly not all, but some would serve more than 1 3-year term as a member. Otherwise, they wouldn't have felt the need to create a qualifying sentence in the last part of that section that stipulates that no member can serve as, say, treasurer for 4 years. I'm sorry, for more than 4 years. So with respect to the term limitations, I'd like to point that out. That there is a possibility, and as I read here, that the option to find out what the framers' intent was with respect to term limits. But at least in as much as being able to indicate that there is no term limit, that is only 1 year, 3-year term. It doesn't stipulate, in the section about 3-year terms, that there is only 1 2 year. There's only 2 or 3 or definitive number. It just stipulates that a term will be 3 years, and upon the termination of that 3-year term, members will be replaced as they leave the board within 90 days. The second point was whether the recommendations, the manager's recommendations, were vetted through publicly. In point of fact, the very next full board meeting, the full board did in fact vote publicly to officially approve the recommendations. In fact, specifically in order to meet the requirement and vote publicly and for the record that the full board approved of the Personnel Committee's recommendations to enact those recommendations and in good faith work with the station manager to modify things that had been doing at the station, and as well as help engender and get past whatever happened in November. Thirdly, in point of fact, at that same meeting, which was only last month, but it seems like forever ago, the full board even decided to not seat any other officers than simply the president and the treasurer positions, specifically so that, well, the president obviously so that we could have a chair for the meeting, and then of course the treasurer, since there was a treasurer's report forthcoming, as well as the urgent need to have a treasurer and a budget approved by the close of that meeting. We're talking about last month's meeting. But we decided as a board not to re-elect a secretary or a vice president, specifically so that it would be open to the 3 candidates that were elected that night and the 3 candidates that were not able to come or continue to stay last month, since that would be, what, 6? We didn't feel that was fair to elect new officers in the absence of fully half of the new prospective candidates. So I hope I'm getting closer to answering the question about whether the board is or is not legitimate, or as I like to prefer to say, in compliance, since we do have the term bylaw. That's been called into question. Again, with respect to whether we are or are not currently in compliance with our own bylaws, I would point out to the Telecom Board and the public, and of course Ms. Burnett, that as Ms. Pancake alluded to earlier in her rebut, the full board we got up to 8 full board members as of the last full board meeting last month. So by definition, the full board of the CAT is back above the threshold of above the minimum of 7, and we're still obviously well within the 90-day period where we would replace those, unfortunately, 2 new members who had to almost immediately resign their positions. And in point of fact, we have 3 new applicants that will be reviewing their applications tomorrow. As I pointed out at the beginning when I introduced myself, I'm the new chair of the policy committee. And with respect to your general question about what does the CAT board do to fix it, I would point out to you, if you haven't already seen the last month's full board committee, and I realize it's a long meeting, chop it up as you need to or wish to. But the policy committee, myself as the chair, I've done a thorough review of both the bylaws and the policies. And in point of fact, the only thing we handled last week in the policy committee was another point of contention with respect to membership and qualifiers and thresholds, specifically committee membership, wherein by our own bylaws, the committee membership is basically suffering the same state of a lack of apparent compliance that the full board was up until last month, wherein it was noticed that committee membership is derived by virtue of an appointment of the full board. In the past, precedent had been, historically, committee membership was simply John Smith and Jane Smith showed up for a committee meeting, since they're public anyway, and since committees, by their nature, are meant to involve public input, feedback, and suggestions. And so, to that end, although that's the way it has operated functionally, I wanted to point out to the policy committee that we needed to address that by our own bylaws. That is not how we need to operate procedurally, so that we are within compliance with our own bylaws. I know that was a lot I threw at you there, but I wrote down enough notes that I should be able to answer any questions for you guys if you have any.
Thank you. Anybody have a question?
So I guess I will just return to my first question. It sounds to me like by the end of your next board meeting that you will be definitely in compliance insofar as your number of members and the election of those members.
That's correct. I say this with a qualifier. At present, the full board consists of 6 duly elected board members. I don't know why it would be the case. I don't know that I've ever seen or even heard of a case where a board applicant was denied being seated on the board. But if it were the case that all 3 applicants, for whatever reason, were not seated tomorrow night, then that would still be a question. But so far as I can tell, having seen the applications myself, since we did consider the 3 that are coming tomorrow night, but they weren't available to speak on their behalf last month, at the time of the election, as it were, I see no reason why there wouldn't be at least 7 to 9 members on the board by this time tomorrow night.
Yes. Also, I'm reminded of our Assistant City Attorney, Jason Kelly, mentioned at our last Telecom Board meeting that if there was a temporary lapse in the standing of the CAT board, and then that was corrected, that the city could choose just to overlook that. And so that looks like what we might want to do here.
You could do that. I would, my brief reading of the bylaws that, again, the bylaws that I took off of their website, assuming those are the bylaws and they're correct and they've been appropriately adopted, I'm not getting into any of that discussion. But if they maintained the minimum number of board members that the bylaws require them to have, and resignations and deaths happen, but it does provide for a period of time in which to fill. And so that doesn't necessarily mean they're quote unquote out of compliance, or that anything they do is invalid or illegal, or the corporation is no longer valid. None of that is the case. Doesn't mean they couldn't vote and agree to pass something, that they would not be able to act with appropriate authority. So that in and of itself is not an automatic switch saying this is all inappropriate, this is all gone. Nothing like that at all.
So, sounds like, in regards to the board standing, everything's gonna probably be okay at the end of the next CAT board meeting.
By my assessments, that
Yes,
is
sir.
correct, Mr. Hilton.
How many formal new applicants were there
You mean for tomorrow's meeting or at last month's meeting?
the last meeting?
The last meeting, there were...
How many are new that will be voted on tomorrow?
How many that were new that, from last month's that are going to be voted on tomorrow? Three applicants from last month's meeting that...
You said there were 6,
There were 6 applicants. We did seat 3 of them.
and they all filed formal applications?
Correct. Unfortunately, 2 of them resigned the next day for matters that I'll leave to the record, but they did resign the next day.
Yes, ma'am, if you would come to the podium where we,
I'll be hanging out for a couple of minutes if you guys have other questions.
thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to correct Bernard on one thing. We had 6 applicants in January, but one of them was not going to be able to be at the January meeting, and she was scheduled for the February meeting. So we only heard 5 applicants.
Thank you. Any question? Anybody else? We have a public question. Yes, ma'am, please return.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say
Yes, sir.
one thing. I've made a commitment that I had to leave after an hour, so I am gonna have to step out. I just wanted to make sure you all knew why and that I wasn't leaving in a huff. Okay. Or in response to something that someone said or anything like that, but our office is open and available should there be any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just a couple of things I'd like to say. First off, I know last month I had to break the bad news to you guys that Sky was resigning, and I know you weren't here, so if you haven't heard yet, Sky Blaylock is resigning. And while day-to-day functions at Community Access Television have been running smoothly despite the problems with the board, when Sky resigns, they're not gonna run smoothly. You know, when Sky resigns, we're gonna lose at least 1 staff member, possibly 2, and potentially all 3. So we're looking at going into the 30th anniversary of community access in Fayetteville with no staff. That is gonna cause a problem. It's not a problem right now. Right now, Sky is still there, the staff is still there, they're all toughing it out through all of this, but they're not gonna stay. They're not gonna stay in this hostile work environment that the board has created for them. And I realize that the board is now trying to throw this all back on the staff, but my original complaint was not about the staff. My complaint was about the board of directors and their actions. Their actions have been unethical. Their actions have been negligent in regard to their own rules. We just had the chairman of the policy committee come up here and say that they just noticed they need a citizen appointed to their committees. They've never had a citizen appointed to their committees, even though this has been in the bylaws since at least 2003. They've just been negligent in their actions, and that has to stop. The current leadership of this board has to change. And I realize that's not something that you guys can do, but I just want to put that out there to the public and everyone else that this can't stay the way it is. I mean, as soon as Sky leaves, Sky, I'm sorry, if the chair would ask Sky what her last day is.
Excuse me.
I'm just saying that really that's not relevant to what we can do.
It's not, that's true.
I know it's not
And
relevant,
it's not
but,
relevant what we can do. She may tell us that when.
but
she
I'm just saying,
presents.
you know, the clock is ticking and, you know, yeah, things are running smoothly today and they're running smoothly tomorrow, but by March 1st, they won't be running smoothly anymore and there will be problems, just so you recognize that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Let's keep tightening our offerings.
Just 2 things. I would like to point out that, as I said earlier, I'm the new policy chair, so I'm trying to tighten that up, and my review was about 2 weeks ago, the policies and bylaws. So Now, with respect to the question about the manager's resignation, I can say this. This is already a matter of record with respect to what the Personnel Committee recommended to the full board and what the full board did, is set to do tomorrow night. The Personnel Committee recommended, and voted voted when it last met to simply file the manager's letter of resignation, not duly and officially accept. So it is not a foregone conclusion, at least not in my mind, or as far as I know, any of the members of the full board who are not on the Personnel Committee, that it is not a foregone conclusion that the manager is in fact gone. Certainly not in my mind, and I'm actually on the Personnel Committee. So I want to make that clear to you guys up there, that insofar as I'm aware, there is no final time or deadline with respect to how long the manager is or is not the manager. Since the Personnel Committee's action was to simply file the letter of resignation and then have the full board, such that we can do it openly and transparently, since that is what some of the complainants have actually accused of the full board of doing, and acting in secrecy and during executive sessions. So, just for the record, the letter of resignation from the manager has been filed so that the full board may choose to do whatever it chooses to do to it, and has not been officially acted upon by the Personnel Committee.
And would you tell us your board, the CAT board meeting is tomorrow night. We're speaking on the 3rd of February, so that meeting's on the 4th of February. And it's what time and where?
It's at 6 p.m. at the PEG Center, excuse me.
Fayetteville Television Center.
So, yes, sir, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Showing how long I've been on the board.
Thank you. Anybody have
Thank you,
any
Jim.
comment? Okay, if we don't have other comment on this area, I'd like to hear the next complaint, which I'm not certain whether there was a complaint from a staff member and from a former Telecom Board member, former CAT Board member, former producer, Richard Drake. Did someone bring that? Did he ask that it be presented to this board tonight? I thought he was asking someone else to do that. Yes, sir, what?
Sorry, I was going to be up here so much tonight. Mr. Drake did attend the last policy committee meeting, and insofar as I'm aware, made no reference to his complaint, but I can say that he did make reference to the manner in which the board, how should we say this, recomposed itself so that it was above that 7 threshold. He may have mentioned to the fact that he would have liked to have the board reseat members who had previously been on it, whose terms were in question, whose memberships were in question due to the apparently erroneous interpretation that there's only one term available per board member. And he suggested that what he would have preferred to have seen at the last policy committee meeting was such that the 3 members in question, with respect to their membership and eligibility to be re-elected, would have gone back and been elected at the same time as the other 6 candidates, so that we would have been able to, in his own words, quote, contend, unquote, for those particular seats, which I would have been glad to not, because then I could have been maybe out here. But that's the extent to which I'm aware of on that particular item for Mr. Drake's complaint.
Well, thank you very much. My understanding was he wanted to put this on the record. And here's a copy of it. And since he didn't show up to read it, I will attempt to read it as quickly as possible. To the members of the Board of Directors, Community Access Television. And I believe this did come to your board, speaking to Chairman. Yes, ma'am. Did Richard's complaint come to your board?
I have seen a one-line complaint from Richard, but that's it.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a recommendation real quick?
Yes, sir.
If this doesn't have anything to do with the legal standing of this, I recommend that we let that board, the CAT board, handle this themselves. It sounds like it's internal. If it has anything of legal standing, we shouldn't, since he's not here to do that himself, let them deal with that internally.
Well, I agree. If you have not seen if it has not been through your board, then we're not in a position to consider it tonight. If he'd been here to make the comment, it would have been part of public comment. So we will not attempt to read it. How about the third complaint? Do we have a copy of the one from a staff member? And is there anyone here to present it? Again, addressing the chairman of the, or president of the CAT board, have you received this is a subject formal grievances from Jory Costello? Yes, sir. Okay, so, we have that scheduled to discuss tomorrow night. Okay, so you've not considered it yet? No, we just received it, I believe back. Okay, that also is not appropriate for discussion. If she had been here to talk about it herself, she could have done that, but it's not in our purview if it says it has not come to your board for a full opportunity to discuss it.
As I understand it, when we receive those complaints, we have, if they're received 10 working days before our board meeting, then we can get them on the next board meeting. Both Richard and Jory's were not made in that time. However, we are going to deal with them at our next board meeting, just like we dealt with Cherie's complaint when it became apparent that, well, when it was brought to our attention, we immediately dealt with it. So we will deal with those also. And then when the board has dealt with them, I will send you the report, the letter, a copy of what.
And those would not come forward to another board if they are resolved in that, in your meeting. I believe Ms. Costello is here now. Jory, would we please come to the podium if you want to talk about your grievance? But what we just discovered what we discovered is that this has not been considered by the CAT board. You're certainly welcome to speak as you choose here, but we cannot listen to it as a formal complaint in the manner that what we were proposing to do tonight to cover all the complaints that had come in. But if you choose to see, let me ask the board this. Do you believe
If it's not to do with the legal requirements, I think that needs to be done within the CAT board first, per their bylaws and per counsel from our legal counsel.
I agree with that.
I agree on that also, and they also should keep in mind the importance of their meeting that they're going to have tomorrow night, that the very existence of their, of the community access television depends on their meeting.
Okay.
Be sincere. It's said in a book that I've read quite a few times, how many times should I forgive my brother? 7 times, and it's, no, 70 times 7. Everyone who is in a position, who has been there for quite a while, gets to feel a certain portion of, I don't want to say, feeling of like they're the supreme boss. They're an elected official, and they're there to do a job. They're there to officiate a meeting. They're there to keep it under control. And there should be a lot of cohesiveness and a lot of keeping our eye on the ball and knowing what's at stake should be the basis for your meeting. Please do that. We don't want to lose you.
Thank you. But you are free to speak at this meeting on the subjects at hand. We've heard the complaints.
Yes.
I just want to say I have already sent
my complaints to the board, to the CAT board.
Thank you. Thank you
That's
very
all
much.
at this time, I guess. Thank you.
Any questions, Ray? Okay, here comes another speaker.
I think the issue here is the CAP board is not acknowledging these complaints, so these people don't know what level it's at, and that's how it ended up in your lap, okay? So maybe they need to understand that they need to acknowledge when the staff asks them a question so that they'll know what, you know, the staff will know what the next action is to take.
Okay, anyone else?
Who will be officiating that meeting?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Have you officiated? I'm sorry. One
I
more
was
thing.
kind of thrown off, but I thought I was going to read what I had already submitted, but if that's not the case, I just want to say that, yes, I have asked of the CAP board questions recently, and I have not received answers, like the outreach committee, and since I'm the outreach specialist, I had asked the outreach committee, subcommittee of the board to reschedule a meeting recently, and I did not receive any response, nor have I received responses from the 2 complaints I have submitted. So there's not as much communication as I would like to, you know, be responded to, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Do we have, yes, ma'am. Please come up and make your request public where we.
I'm sorry. I was just asking Jory to send me both complaints because I have received one. I'm drawing a blank on the second one that she just talked about, so I just asked her to send both of them to me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I do have an email for the first time. If the only substantive issue is whether board members can be reelected, why not simply amend the CAT charter to specify specifically one way or the other? And this is signed by Hog Eye Bill. Maybe it's a good time to ask for the phone number to be put on the television so that people who might want to use the telephone can call in and ask a question while we still have people here to answer those questions. And there it is, 575-8299. And we will attempt to answer it. We've got state-of-the-art answering devices here on the desk. So please call in if you choose, 575-8299. Do we have someone else from the public in the room want to speak? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, so I know the public can't hear you. Well, I think the person who emailed, I'm sorry, it's not a.
I didn't know if you were fielding questions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I didn't know if you were fielding that. Since you read the question, I didn't know if you wanted an answer or not.
Well, you may.
I was just going to say that actually, it is my intent with respect to all policies and all bylaws to continue to thoroughly review them as thoroughly as I have already. Excuse me, because to consider such things like that. The bylaws actually require a supermajority of the full board. They require a 2/3 majority for approval. The policies simply require a simple majority. The bylaws also have another stipulation when it comes to amendment, revision, or excuse me, any other modifications, where there is a 15 days previous to the full board meeting that has to be sent out, meaning the amendment or the revision or the to the bylaw in question. It has to be sent out and publicly 15 days prior to a full board meeting so that it can be publicly vetted, excuse me, and heard. And so, insofar as the answer to that question is, there's not currently anything that as far as I'm aware, that the full board is not considering doing, up to and including another question that didn't get asked or answered earlier with respect to the minimum number of board members being considered being drawn down from 7 to 5. At current, it doesn't seem to be the issue if we would address it tomorrow night, but that was one of the precipitating factors originally, was the question about going down from 7 to 5. With respect, again, I'll reiterate for the emailer, the question is a definitive, yes, that's being considered. Nothing keeping us from doing just that.
Thank you.
Apparently our phone seems
All right,
to
our
be,
state-of-the-art system's not plugged in.
Very loose connection. It was
We'll give that a minute if you can get it plugged in. Maybe someone is trying to call. Any other comments from the board? Some of you haven't spoken.
I have a recommendation. I think we've heard from both sides, and I think it's their responsibility to work inside their board with their staff. And I thank them all for giving their points of view. And then I think we just need to seek legal counsel on if there's anything that is, in our view, that we need to report to the council that it's not legally binding, and then we need to reconsider as a contract. But at this point, I think we've had plenty of dialogue, an hour and a half of dialogue from all parties, and including trying to get something on the phone. I think we should close this meeting. It's my recommendation.
If I'm at home watching this and I have concerns, then I'm gonna make sure that I participate in that meeting tomorrow night. I would encourage people to do that, to have concerns. I mean, real quick summary of my thoughts is, when you have infighting like this and you have one side saying one thing, one side saying the other, the real losers here are the public. And to Mr. Cusinelli's point, CAT is a great piece of this city. So I hope the problem gets fixed, and I trust that it will at some point. But let's not lose sight of the real losers here.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. If there's no other public comment? Come forward, Mr. Farrell, please.
There has been a great deal of discussion about Freedom of Information Act, if I can get that spat out, findings. There is currently the December 2009 revision of the Freedom of Information Act booklet posted to the CAT Fayetteville website that anyone on the board and the public, I know that this is being broadcast live, can go to the CAT website and peruse through the Freedom of Information Act booklet as released by the Arkansas Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. We have another email, and it's from Mrs. Catherine Sherrill. And she writes, I'm a former manager of public access TV in Fayetteville. When Fayetteville Open Channel provided public access, we had a board of 16 with at-large positions for 9 of those seats. The seats that had to be filled by people representing specific interests were business and professional, higher education, communications such as media and, or obviously media, but also the public schools, the social services, the arts, and government. I believe the represented seats, or representational seats, small print on the laptop, I believe the representational seats have changed to include senior citizens and an access producer, to name just 2. And I was around when Access for CAT decided that the government position was probably a conflict of interest. I believe, I'm sorry, excuse me, Catherine, for not reading it well here. I certainly agree with those who have said it is a hard job to keep the board up to the numbers and representative of the interests required by the bylaws. But hard or not, it is vital to the continuation of public access TV in Fayetteville. Without that kind of widespread interest, access can't stand up to the recurring complaints people make about its content. CAT has to represent the spectrum of the community. That said, I hope the Telecom Board and or city will move carefully If the current board, she's speaking here of the CAT board, is indeed out of compliance, and even if that does mean a breach of contract, I hope a way will be found to allow the board to correct its shortcomings and move on from there. I have been involved in public access TV in Fayetteville since 1982, and I believe it has been very well run and successful these last 5 years or so. To throw out the baby with the bathwater will, I'm afraid, cause an upheaval that will take a long time to recover from. I would rather see the progress continue with the current staff and board members who are still interested in working for the good of the center. Thank you, Catherine Sherrills. And she was the Fayetteville Government Channel Manager from 1986 to 90 and helped found Access for Fayetteville, or Access for CAT, co-founder in 1991, and then served on the cable board 1997 to 99 and was chairman in 98, 99. So that takes us back more than a decade of history that she's sharing with us, and I believe I could get an amen.
I think that's a great way to end the meeting.
Thank you very much. If there's no other pressing business, this meeting's adjourned.